The girl saw with horror how the huge python was strangling the pregnant, completely defenseless cat. The girl rushed to help. The python's grip was too strong. The girl burst into tears, realizing that the cat and her unborn kittens could not be saved. But at that moment, someone completely unexpected came to their rescue. Sarah had always loved animals. Since childhood, she had dreamed of a big house where she could shelter many homeless pets. But this dream remained unattainable for now. Sarah lived in a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Her one-room apartment was on the second floor of an old brick building. Despite her limited resources, she tried to help homeless animals as much as she could. She especially loved cats. Sarah was a nurse at the local hospital and often worked night shifts. Despite being tired after her shifts, she always found time for her charges. Every morning, Sarah would go outside with a bag of cat food. She would place the food in bowls set in secluded spots. The bowls were colorful. Sarah had bought them at the pet store to make the street look more cheerful and bright. Stray cats of different breeds and sizes would gather around. Sarah knew each one by sight and even gave them names. Sarah had grown especially attached to a small black cat with a white patch on her chest. Sarah named her Midnight. Midnight had bright green eyes and a small scar on her left ear. Recently, Midnight had noticeably rounded. She was pregnant and expecting kittens. Sarah worried about the future litter. She knew well that the street was no place for newborn kittens, but her small apartment would be too cramped for the animals. Living next door to Sarah was an elderly man named John. He was about 70 years old but looked even older. John's gray hair was always neatly combed, and his clothes were ironed. John used to be a military pilot and had participated in many operations. His apartment was filled with photos and awards, reminding him of his glorious past. He had recently moved to their neighborhood and kept to himself. John rarely interacted with anyone and seldom left his house. His only companion was a large golden retriever named Buddy. Buddy was not just a dog. He used to be a service dog in the search and rescue service and had participated in many rescue operations. Sarah tried to befriend her new neighbor. She would greet him when they met and try to strike up a conversation. But John always replied curtly and hurried away. It was clear that socializing was burdensome for him. From other neighbors, Sarah learned John's sad story. It turned out that he had recently lost his only son, Michael. The young man worked as a rescuer and died in the line of duty. It happened during a severe forest fire. Michael was rescuing people from a burning village. After Michael's death, John took his dog Buddy home. It was his only connection to his deceased son. Knowing this story, Sarah felt even more sympathy for her gloomy neighbor. She understood his grief and loneliness, but all attempts to befriend him remained unsuccessful. One morning, as usual, Sarah went out to feed the cats and noticed Midnight was missing. The black cat was usually the first to come for breakfast, but today she was nowhere to be seen. Sarah became worried. At that stage of pregnancy, Midnight should not have gone far. After feeding the other cats, Sarah set out to look for Midnight. She searched the entire street, looking under bushes and in basements. Unfortunately, Midnight was nowhere to be found. Sarah began to worry seriously. She called the cat by name, but only the singing of birds and the noise of passing cars responded. The girl then expanded her search beyond the street. Near the house was a small wasteland overgrown with tall grass. Thorny weeds clung to Sarah's jeans as she made her way through the thickets. Sarah decided to check there too. After a couple of minutes, she suddenly heard a faint meow. Sarah hurried towards the sound. Her heart pounded with anxiety. Parting the thick grass, she screamed in horror. Before her was a terrifying scene. A huge python was wrapped around Midnight's small body. The snake was at least 2 meters long, with patterned brown skin. It was slowly tightening its deadly coils. Despite the shock, Sarah guessed that the python, attacking Midnight, had escaped from a neighboring house. Its owner was an irresponsible exotic pet lover. Fear paralyzed Sarah for a moment. A thought flashed through her mind. She was too late. Midnight couldn't be saved. But then the girl pulled herself together. She needed to act and act quickly. Sarah looked around for something to distract the snake with. But there was nothing suitable around, only grass and small stones. In despair, Sarah shouted for help. Her voice echoed across the wasteland, but only silence responded. The girl tried to pry the snake's tight coils off the unfortunate cat with her hands, but the python's grip was too strong. Sarah was completely desperate and burst into loud sobs, and at that moment, something incredible happened. Buddy heard the girl's cries and sobs. The dog had just gone out for a morning walk with his owner. Buddy's ears stood up when he caught the desperate screams. The dog pricked up his ears and barked, drawing John's attention. John looked at the dog in surprise. The usually calm and obedient Buddy was acting very strangely. He was barking and pulling on the leash towards the wasteland. The old man frowned. Something was clearly wrong. After hesitating for a second, John decided to check what was going on. He let go of the leash and Buddy instantly dashed off. The dog confidently led his owner to the sound of Sarah's cries. His golden fur glistened in the morning sun. When they reached the scene, John saw his neighbor in a panic, flailing around the huge snake. A small animal, probably a cat, was writhing in the python's coils. Midnight's eyes were wide with terror, but due to the python's strong grip, she could no longer scream and was barely breathing. Despite his age, John acted quickly and decisively. He looked around and noticed a thick, dry branch nearby. The bark on the branch was peeling in places, exposing the light wood. Picking it up, the old man rushed towards the python. Buddy, sensing the danger, stood next to his owner. The hair on the dog's nape stood on end. Buddy bared his teeth, growling threateningly at the snake, and began attacking it with his sharp fangs and claws. The python, feeling a serious threat, loosened its grip for a moment. That moment was enough for Sarah. She rushed forward and grabbed Midnight by the hind legs. With one pull, the girl freed the cat from the snake's coils. Midnight let out a plaintive meow, but did not resist. Having lost its prey, the python tried to attack Buddy, but the dog deftly dodged the strike. John swung the branch, driving the snake away. For a few seconds, the python swayed menacingly before them, but then it slowly slithered into the grass. The rustling of the grass gave away its movement for some time. Sarah hugged the trembling Midnight to her chest. Tears of horror and relief rolled down her cheeks. She looked gratefully at John and Buddy. Without them, she wouldn't have coped and would have lost her beloved cat forever. During the rescue, Sarah received several scratches from thorny plants, but didn't even notice it in the heat of the struggle for the cat's life. John, saving Midnight, remembered his first aid skills he had been taught during his service. After this incident, John and Sarah grew closer. The old man offered to look after Midnight until she gave birth to her kittens. Soon, the cat safely delivered 5 adorable babies. Among Midnight's kittens was one with an unusual color, completely white with different colored eyes, which is considered a great rarity. Sarah and John cared for the feline family together, and after a while, they found new owners for the kittens. The story of Midnight's rescue made it to the local news, drawing attention to the issue of homeless animals in the city. This incident changed both their lives forever. John finally stopped avoiding people, and Sarah found a loyal friend and helper. Together, they decided to open a small shelter for homeless animals. In the process of creating the shelter, Sarah and John, of course, faced bureaucratic hurdles, but with the support of the local community, they managed to overcome all difficulties. John used his connections among former colleagues to find sponsors for the shelter and provide it with the necessary equipment. A year later, the shelter became a favorite place for many residents of the area. Abandoned animals found homes there, and lonely people found friends and companionship. John and Sarah began to conduct lessons in schools about responsible pet ownership, teaching children the importance of caring for pets. Buddy became a real star of the shelter. He helped socialize shy dogs and even babysit kittens, showing remarkable gentleness. Sarah started a blog about the shelter's life, which quickly gained popularity and helped find homes for many animals. Every year on the anniversary of Midnight's rescue, Sarah and John hold an open day at the shelter, inviting everyone to meet its inhabitants and perhaps find a new friend.